Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our first of 9 speaker series here in the park with Mark Krancer, who took the iconic photo Life in the River just about a year ago. 2 days ago? Was it 3 days ago?
Yeah.
Believe it or not, 4 days. Okay. So as everyone may remember, water rushed into the park during Hurricane Irma, and Mark was waist deep up in the water, which I wouldn't have done. I only stood back there to get the shot, but we're really excited to have him kick off our speaker series. For those of you in the back, if you'd like a seat, there are a couple more here, and we also have a couple of blankets here, which you can move back if you'd like as well to sit down. After Mark wraps up his speaker series, we're doing our first ever historical walking tour of Memorial Park, which a lot of people know. There are a bunch of different monuments around the park that a lot of people don't know about. So we're going to do that as well. It'll only take about a half an hour or so for anyone who's interested in that. So without further ado, here's Mark Krancer.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me? All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming out today. This is quite an honor to be able to kick this off, and definitely exciting. Now, please forgive me. I'm not the greatest speaker in the world, but I'll try my best because I'm very passionate about Memorial Park. Okay. Is that better? Can everyone hear me? Good. So just a little background about me. I'm not a Jacksonville native. I grew up in Houston, Texas, and kind of had a past. You know, we have a story like all of us. You know, one of the things I love about Memorial Park is that it's for the people, and I believe it was always intended to be a park for people to enjoy. You know, it's something that is very unique, and you know, when I moved to Florida back in 2004, I moved to Melbourne, and I had no thoughts about Jacksonville. Went through some dark periods in my life. You know, suffered a long time with addiction. Still something I have to fight, but praise the Lord, later on this month it'll be 6 years clean. Thank you. However, that addiction did land me a prison sentence. So I had to go away for a year and a half. And when I was inside, like, I got transferred to Jacksonville, and I was like, Jacksonville? I mean, you know, I hadn't put in for a transfer or anything like that, but, you know, don't really have much choice in that sort of thing. But I moved here, and I was a GED tutor, and I had a fellow GED tutor who was from Jacksonville, and he told me about this place called Riverside. He's like, okay, because I mean, you know, I was really bent on starting my life over, not going back to the things I used to do, and just having a clean, fresh start. And, you know, I think we all kind of need that at some point in our lives for one reason or another. But he drew me a very rough sketch of Riverside, a map that's actually pretty accurate. I recently saw a copy of, well, a version of it, a hand-drawn version in The Resident, and I was like, wow, he was pretty dead on. But I had that, didn't have Google, couldn't Google anything about the neighborhood, but I got out. I had housing over in Springfield through Prisoners of Christ Ministry. And my dad, he lives in Houston, but he came to Jacksonville to pick me up and help me get settled in, and I'm very thankful for that. We went to the house in Springfield, and it wasn't quite time for us to get settled in yet. No one was home, so we just wanted to go for a drive and see Jacksonville. So January 5th, 2014, I was released, and we came down Riverside Ave, and I remember seeing Memorial Park for the first time. And I didn't go into the park that day, but I saw the Life statue, I saw the beautiful open space of the park. And really at that point, I mean, of course I was overcome with joy because I was out. But, you know, it was at that point, and through seeing the historic architecture in Riverside, that I was like, you know, this is where I want to live. You know, so some time passed. I got settled in. You know, it was very tough. Had basically $50 and had to get an ID with $32 of that. You know, so definitely starting over. You know, I had a bag of my goods, and that was it. But you know, Memorial Park doesn't have an admission fee. You know, I was blessed with a bike, and granted, this is January, February, March. I loved biking because I didn't have to sweat up a storm to do it. So I would go down to the library, get a book, come into the park and read, because you know, sometimes it takes a little while to get jobs and all that, especially if you have a past like me. But I loved the beauty of the park from the beginning, just the peacefulness, and how you can, on any day, you can just see a slice of so many different parts of Jackson. You know, you can come here and see all ages, colors, you know, different demographics here, just enjoying the park. And I believe there's a reason for it. It's just a universal attraction. People come here from all over. And, you know, just to go forward a little bit, when this image was made last year, you know, I shared it with all sorts of people, international, national, and local. But it's those connections to the park that, if someone's been to the park, if someone's aware of the Life Statue in Memorial Park, they instantly connect with that photo. If someone sees it that's across the country or across the world, you know, they think it's a cool photo, but they don't have those memories of being in the park. Like, you know, there's I mean, we all have our stories at the park, and you know, so this is mine. So about 6 months after I got out, my GED tutor friend got out as well, and we were able to save up every penny we had and move into Riverside. Lived right over there by Bold Bean, right across from John Gorey. And about a week afterwards, I had a good friend of mine that lived about a street down. I saw him every day at that point. He helped me out a lot, but he passed away unexpectedly. And that was my first real trial as far as when I got out, as far as, you know, am I going to go back to things I used to do? You know, me and my roommate there, we came down to Memorial Park that night. Now, granted, we might have been here after the curfew, and several times in my story that might appear, so, you know, I don't condone coming here after night, or, you know, after dark, but, yeah, it is what it is. But we came here and we sat down by the river, and just, we were able to talk things out, and, you know, the park was there for me. You know, the area was here. You know, I can recall, because I used to work nights production at Florida Times Union. I would ride my bicycle, you know, maybe 2, 3 in the morning. I would come down to the park, and one time in particular strikes me. There was a huge moon, big full moon, and there was a couple sitting right by the benches by the river. And in my headphones I had playing, I had Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade playing, and I connected those two together as just like this beautiful art form. You know, to see the silhouette of this couple sitting by the river, you know, not a care in the world, just enjoying each other's company. at that point, I was taking a few photos on my phone. You know, I was biking around. I did what was called what I call guerrilla photography, where I would basically, in my bike travels, I would stop somewhere, take a photo, be back on the bike within a minute. You know, and that's kind of how I rolled. But around that time, I got off the night shift and started working 7 a.m. And shipping at Times Union. And that allowed me to bike at sunrise 10 months of the year. You know, so I had that job for about 2 years and maybe a year and a half. But I was just able to be out there. Now, granted, I also have several DUIs, so I could not get a license for a while. I have one now, praise Jesus. but you know, for several years I've had to bike everywhere, and I know there's several people here that remember those days. Everywhere. You know, just capturing the beauty of Riverside along the Riverwalk at sunrise. I mean, we are blessed with a very beautiful city. You know, not everyone can see it, but I mean, I see it. You know, and capturing sunrises and just having that passion just open up. At that point, I was still taking photos on the phone quite a bit. I would come to Memorial Park because, again, I was attracted to its beauty. I was attracted to everything going on here. And I started sharing a lot of the photos I took with the Memorial Park Association Facebook page, which at that time was ran by Robin Patton. And she was a very early, big supporter of my work, always encouraged me to keep coming in and photographing and sharing it, you know. And when you're just starting out with something like that, you know, like I'll take a photo and I'll think, okay, that's cool. But, you know, when you see that recognition for something you're doing, something that you love doing, when you see that resonate with other people, that's very encouraging. You know, so, you know, she kept sharing, and I would keep coming to the park. Now, around this time, my good buddy Bob, way back in the back there, he blessed me with my very first camera, my first big boy DSLR camera, and which I'm very thankful for, very grateful for, because at that time I was still trying to rebuild my life, and I would never have considered getting a camera on my own. But I would come back to the park and I would learn the principles of photography in Memorial Park. You know, I would bike here with my gear, and my first ever canvas was printed of a portion of the life statue. It's kind of the bottom part of the image and part of the fountain. But I learned the principles of photography through that shot. Like there's not to bore you to death with photography stuff, but there's something called the exposure triangle, and ISO is one portion of that. So I would keep dipping the ISO down, and the light would get better, more details would emerge, and that's like one of those defining moments of the principles of photography for me. I never went to a school. I mean, I would try something out on Facebook, I would read a post, then go apply it in the field, and that's basically how I learned. So most of, well actually my first exhibit was at the downtown library, and you know, that was mostly, you know, there were some cell phone shots, but there were some shots of with the big boy camera, and one of them was a very exciting piece that I was in Memorial Park just photographing the statue because that's what I love doing, and these bikers, these bicyclists came, like just a whole gang of them came up into the park and just started hanging out right there by the park, or right by the life statue. So of course I had to try to capture that energy, and you know, it worked. It took a pretty pretty cool photo, I suppose some would say. But you know, it's just that excitement, being able to capture that, and you never quite know what you'll find in Memorial Park, you know. Now, my first date with my wife was right here in Memorial Park. It was right on one of those benches, right on the other side of the Life statue. We met there. Our first photo ever taken together was right over there. Because, I mean, what better place for me to bring my wife, especially on a budget, than Memorial Park. You know, I was grateful. I think she brought the coffee, and you know, I brought the park. But you know, it was pretty awesome. My first paying photo gig was in the park. My wife, she wanted some photos of my now stepsons, Gavin and Logan. So we met them all here in the park, and you know, they got photos by the Eagles, and then I got my first concerned dad moment even before I was ever had that role of dad. The boys started getting way too close to the balustrades, and they were pretty itty bitty. I mean, they could squeeze through there, and yeah, my first concerned dad moment right here in the park. You know, so a lot of magical firsts for our family in the park, and you know, then the photography kept growing. You know, Jeanette, she was a big supporter of my work. She got some pieces for the Claws for a Cause that were raffled off as a donation to the park, and you know, that was awesome just to be able to do that. And Lori Jarvis, you know, having her Cool Moose Cafe exhibits, opening up her space for me, and able to showcase some of the park's photos there. So, you know, fast forward about a year or so, I proposed to my wife, not in Memorial Park. I proposed to her at our friend's beach house on July 4th, as the fireworks are going off and everything. To be completely honest, I was concerned about the lights, so I proposed to her right before because the light was dying. So if someone watches this, they'll call me a liar for that, but you know. So I proposed to her, and we're planning for the wedding. You know, the wedding's still a while out because I'm going to school. I'm getting my bachelor's in logistics, and you know, she's going to school as well. So we're praying about how we're going to come together as a family, how we're going to make the wedding possible financially, because you know, I'm still struggling to get up on my feet. I had an exhibit at the airport at that time at the Haskell Gallery, and a lot of the focus at that time was for some of those prints to sell, and you know, some of them did sell. But you know, there's some good that can come out of a tragedy, and that tragedy for the park and for much of Jacksonville was Hurricane Irma. You know, there's still people recovering from that. I spoke with a lady just the other day that still hasn't moved back into her house here in Riverside, right around the park. You know, so there's the ongoing effects of that, and especially I think this week with all the activity out there right now, you know, it's easy for us to remember what we all went through with flooding and all that in Jacksonville. So I was fully prepared to hunker down for the storm. The weatherman had told me to do that enough times, so okay, I'm gonna hunker down. I got some photography books, and I was just sitting at my place. I'd moved over to the Cork area by then, and just sitting there reading. And I see the water approaching because we had a creek out back, and the water is getting higher and higher. And I had to move my car, but nothing terrible. Never lost power or anything like that. But I get this text message from my pastor, Steve Clifton. He had evacuated to Tennessee, and he sent me this message saying that there was 4 feet of water at Memorial Park at the Life statue. Now, you can't tell me something like that and expect me not to go take photos. I mean, granted, he did it out of the kindness of his heart because he's a very genuine man, and he was concerned about my safety. But, yeah, so I got on my shoes, or my sandals, and got my gear together as quickly as I could, and started down Stockton. So my plan was just to take Stockton all the way to Riverside. Yeah, no, that wasn't happening. Right around where that little convenience store is on Stockton, you couldn't get past there. I mean, the water was just flooding. So I stopped there, and I ran into buddy of mine from the art world, Sean Rycroft. Him and a friend were on the bike just exploring, seeing what all the flooding was doing. So I stayed there for a few minutes, and then I was like, you know what? I got to get to Memorial Park. So I kind of went up towards 5 Points, parked the car, and went down. And you couldn't get across Riverside and what's the intersection there? Riverside and Margaret, because it was just completely flooded. I had to walk around a little bit, but I'll never forget that first moment I set eyes on the park. This is a park I love. This is a park I care deeply about, and here's all this water just coming in. I think at that moment, like, people ask me, like, why did I do that? Why did I risk everything, to go do that? I think it was just a photographic drive that took over, and that's the best way I can describe it. Like, that here's something that is occurring that, Lord willing, is a once in a lifetime event. But I saw other people going into the water, and not to be the guy that follows the herd off the cliff. But hey, there, I saw down power lines over here. The wind's whipping through the park, especially down Park or Margaret there. It was whipping real loud. But yeah, down power lines, water, sandals, sure. Hey, didn't have time to think of all those details. Just kind of go almost head first into it. So I took a photo. By then, Sean and his friend had came over, and if you've ever gone through my website and seen the Hurricane Irma section, there's 2 guys on bicycles, basically right at the very edge of the park, and that's where the water stopped. So that's a very powerful thing to me. That just tells you how, you look at the river on a day like today, and it's hard to imagine. It's calm, it's serene, it's well below the seawall, but that's just how much the river can rise, and we're all at its mercy, especially if we live in an area right by it. But Sean and his friend they actually started going and getting closer to the statue. So I was like, okay, I'll get closer to the statue. So keep getting closer, keep getting closer. I'm about up to my knees, and I'm getting some kind of cool photos, but it's like, no, I mean, I didn't have the big fancy photography gear. I had one lens that had a decent zoom, but still I had to get pretty close to be able to get the effect I wanted. Like, I had this image in my mind of capturing one of these waves breaking over the statue, and just kept trying to get it. Wasn't quite working out. So I was like, okay. By this time, Sean and a few others have made it basically all the way to the base of the statue. And I just decided, okay, I'm going to take the plunge. There were people in the park, but there wasn't a single place to put down electronics or anything like that. Mind you, this is about 10 to 11 a.m. on September 11th, and the rain had just stopped. So, like, I wasn't, like, getting wet necessarily from above, but everything was, of course, soaked. So I was like, okay, I can't put my phone down, can't put my keys down. I didn't want the key fob to get wet. So I was like, all right, take the plunge. I put my phone in my hand like this as I'm adjusting the lens on the camera. I had my keys dangling from my mouth. So that's kind of the level of determination I had to take this shot. Now, granted, I would just kind of scoot up, and if I felt like a branch or something in the water, oh yeah, I was freaking out. But I ended up making it all the way, basically about this high on at the water, and I got to pretty much that first light pole over there, and that's where I took the photo. It was one of probably about 300 I took in that row, but it just, something about, how the wave crashes right there. It just made for a very striking photo, and I could appreciate that. Like, I was hoping I had something, but, really, honestly, I was so caught up in the moment, just trying to capture as much as I could, that I just kept going. So I ended up going to Times Union, getting some shots over there by the Riverwalk. I ended up going to San Marco. Now, mind you, if you're ever in a hurricane situation again, did not know this until that day, but manhole covers rise up from the street, and you'll see bubbles coming out of the middle of the street. And if you see that, you don't want to get anywhere close to that. So I had seen first responders saving a family over there, and they had told me that. And I was shuffling the rest of the time there. When I saw the bubbles coming out of the street, I said, nope, that's where I draw the line. We all have a line we don't cross, that's mine. So I backed on out of there. Went back to my house to edit the photos, edited Life in the River and several others that day, and I wanted to get them out there quickly because people wanted to know what was going on in their neighborhood. And I thought about it, people don't have power, people are cooped up for the most part. I want to share this, and I shared it to several groups, and that thing just started going crazy. I mean, like one guy, Jason Braddock, he shared it from the Memorial Park Association's page, and I don't know what it was, if he used hashtags or what, but just from his one share, there were 3,000 shares. And I mean, it's hard for me to count who might have seen it, but I estimate probably 1,000 or 1 million people saw it through Facebook. Literally 1 million people. It's kind of wild to think about. I'd never experienced anything like that with a photo before. it was definitely a surprise to be in a situation like that to me. But I had to get back out and photograph more, because we're still in the middle of a hurricane. Like, we're still dealing with the effects of this. So I went back down to Memorial Park towards sunset. I wanted to see what was going on. And it's when I came back here and I saw the balustrades destroyed. They look like some Greek ruin, like little pieces of a chessboard that have just been, flung about. And I mean, like I said, my first day with my wife, we were walking right there along those balustrades. So I couldn't help but feel, that what in the world's going on here, that intense sadness for the park. And we're still having to get those repaired. And I mean, I know that's a long process, but gotta have it done right, But at that point, the photo had been starting to get shared everywhere. I mean, I couldn't hardly look at Facebook without just being sucked into everything that was going on. But I was like, okay, if this photo can be used for some good, then I want it to be. There was great response to that. I started getting them printed up shortly after. And I'm truly blessed to say that just through photos or sales of this photo, Life in the River in its various forms, I've been able to donate over $8,000 in money and goods to the park. And for me, just thank you. But I mean, to me, just being someone who's been from my background, who came to the park and had nothing but a roof over my head, my faith, and the beauty of Jacksonville, like, that's amazing to me, for me to be able to do that. Like, and it's incredibly humbling to be a part of that. So I told my wife shortly after that this photo will affect us one way or another for the rest of our lives, and I believe it's definitely ringing true a year later. I started my company Krancer Photo maybe a year before Irma, and it was definitely in the red because I had a lot of investing to do in it. But that's turned around, and I believe sold somewhere around 700 to 800 prints of Life in the River, and they're on walls all the way from Seattle to Sweden, Los Angeles to Italy. It's kind of wild to think that Memorial Park, a photo of Memorial Park, can be represented in so many different places. But shortly after that, things started happening with. I was put on the River City Live for their first interview after they got back on the air. Jacksonville Magazine, Void Magazine, of course, Fabulous Resident News, Times Union, and many others all shared the photo. And I've been in a very unique position to hear so many people's stories of the park since then. And I've been reached out to from descendants of the Olmsteads who designed the park. I've happened to sell one to someone whose great grandmother was the leg model for the Life statue. That's pretty interesting. But even people have like photos from the 30s of their family hanging out in the park, and just generations and generations of people enjoying this park, and they share them, and that's like incredible to be just able to wrap my head around that. I've always loved history, but to like see that and
people tell their stories. I mean, that's an amazing blessing to me. And you know, when you know the park, it really means so much more when you understand what we went through that day. I've been blessed to do so many fantastic assignments for Memorial Park since then, and I've been able to expand for statewide photo shoots of historic preservation, and you know, that's what I love doing. So that's all because of Memorial Park. That's because of what Memorial Park's done for me from day one, and still a fantastic part of my life. It was the photo was submitted for a Pulitzer Prize. It didn't win, but still, just to be in that category of being up there and doing that, that's pretty wild. You know, just for a guy like me, just regular guy. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we were preparing our wedding. Our wedding was October 20th. And we did our reveal in Memorial Park. And we had planned that before the hurricane, before all that, because this park means so much to us. We wanted to be here. And I saw my beautiful wife for the very first time in her bridal gown at the Life statue. And I mean, that's one of the most beautiful moments of my life. You know, we have a canvas of that up on the wall. Not that I need that to remember that moment as I turned around and saw her, but you know, that's just our connection to the park. Our first morning of our honeymoon was in the park, and we ran into Michelle. We stayed at the Riverdale Inn, fabulous place. We have photos of the wedding. You know, obviously, photographer got lots of photos of the wedding. But the ones we chose to hang up in our house are ones of us in Memorial Park. It's us as a family hanging out on the green a few days before the reveal. For one, it's a beautiful location, but for two, it's what means so much to us. I mean, don't get me wrong, where we got married means a lot to us as well, but just the beauty of this park resonates. So since then, we've moved out of the neighborhood. We had to do that for a few reasons, and my wife gets to hear about it every few days about how my heart just dies a little bit when I'm not in Riverside. But she knows this is where I consider home, because it's so, you know, I mean, I see a guy playing with a soccer ball right behind y'all right now. He's just twirling it around, and I mean, it's fun. You never know what you'll see out here, and it's just a great slice of life. It's a great slice of all our lives, and I just want to thank you all for just hearing my little slice of life here in the park. Thank you.
So thank you, Mark, very much for kicking off our first speaker series. As I mentioned, we'll have 9 total. Does anyone have any questions for Mark that you'd like to ask?
Just to say, that's the most heartfelt story I've ever heard. Seriously.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
I try to speak from the heart, you know.
When you entered the park, did you come straight down the middle, or did you?
No, I came in from basically the intersection there. I crossed over by Einstein Bagel, kind of waded my way through the corner over there, and I came in. And actually, a fun thing was, interesting thing was, there was a hole right through the state of Florida flag, which I thought was interesting. It was perfect right where the seal would be. But anyways, I walked in there, and I kind of stayed on this side of the park, because one of the things I learned from photographing this park so many times was I knew what angle I wanted to approach the statue from. A lot of people prefer, well, maybe not prefer, but they just go ahead and shoot straight up at the statue. And to me, that statue is so much more dynamic than just doing that. So I approach it from the side, and you get the spirit of the winged victory coming out there, and that's I pretty much stayed on the right side and got my way up to the first pole there, and okay, between those two poles, that was pretty much where I stayed, and then I backed on out that way because you definitely didn't want to travel too much in here that day, but I did see people going out to the statue, touching it. In fact, one guy, he got shocked because because the lights were still on in the base of the statue, so when he touched it, he got shocked. He was okay, but it was a very dangerous place, and when I came back later that night and I saw all the balustrades as basically chess pieces out there, the river was at a level where you could not tell where the ground ended and where the true river actually began. So it was definitely dangerous, and I heard a few reports of kids that were playing on it, busting their knees and stuff like that. But yeah, that was pretty wild. Yes, ma'am.
When you submitted the photo to the Krancer committee, were you able to provide written context? Because I suspect that they didn't realize what they were seeing.
Well, yes, they do have several areas where you can submit written context. You have to show that you've been published. So I submitted like the Resident News, the Jacksonville Magazine article. And then, in fact, one of the things I submitted as well was Charles Adrian Pillar's sculptor's statement, which, if y'all have never read After the Storm, you look at the photo there, and I'll just read y'all this, because it's very prophetic. While striving to make a composition visualizing this, I found a poem by Alan Seeger, a soldier victim of the war. At once I saw the typical spirit of the boys who went overseas, saw with their eyes a world in the insane grip of greed and ambition, caught in the ceaseless swirl of selfishness, hate, and covetousness, ever struggling against submergence. I saw these boys giving up their homes, sweethearts, wives, and mothers to go overseas and through the supreme sacrifice make secure the happiness and safety of their loved ones. With this vivid picture in mind, I constructed a sphere to represent the world, engirdled with masses of swirling water, typifying the chaotic earth forces. In this surging mass of waters, I shaped human figures, all striving to rise above this flood, struggling for mere existence. Last, surmounting these swirling waters, with their human freight, I placed the winged figure of youth, representative of spiritual life, the spirit of these boys, which was the spirit of victory. Immortality attained not through death, but deeds, not a victory of brute force, but of spirit. This figure of youth sacrificed wears his crown of laurels won. He holds aloft an olive branch, the emblem of peace. So, to put something like that in there, that's so prophetic of what we went through, submergence, surging massive waters. I did submit that with it, and a few other written things. I submitted like a before and after picture so they could really visually see what happened. The one that won for this year was the Charlottesville protest, as the man was getting ran over, and there's a body that's going over the car, But I also have Bold City Best coming up, which I'm a finalist for Best Photographer in Jacksonville. Anyone who voted, thank you so much. We'll find out if I won that September 27th. So, and a lot of that, again, is directly because of this photo, and been a huge blessing.
I'm curious about your brand, Cram. Are you trying to cram a lot in, or?
So, back in the day, we were sitting around a Denny's one night, up to no good, and me and some of my teenage buddies said our names backwards. So Wes, one of my best friends, his name became Sue. And when we got to mine, you know, I said, Cram! And, you know, it just kind of stayed there as a little thing for years. But when I started thinking about making a photography business, I didn't want to be Mark Krancer photography. I didn't want to be beautiful moments photography, blah, blah, blah. No, boring. I wanted something different. So why not Cran? So it's my first name backwards and the first 4 letters of my last name forward. Yeah, like regular. Cran photo.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again, Mark.